Здравствуй, товарищ, and welcome to Wargame European Escalation. My name is Hob Gadling, and today we'll be playing through the final mission of the game, WMD. As usual, everything we need, everything we will use has already been unlocked. Nothing new left, so let's go.
Here is our prize at last. Vogel's U.S. Air Force Base. The Americans were storing nuclear ordnance here. My Spetsnaz infiltrated the place before we arrived. They made sure the weapons weren't moved. All our beloved leaders, both Western and Eastern, are gathered in Stockholm to sign another peace treaty, which they'll eventually trash, sending soldiers again to a useless death. But we have a unique opportunity to change that, to make history. With the nuclear ordnance stored here, we will make them all pay. We'll just have to hold long enough for our engineers to get them ready. It's vital to protect the SAM site to keep the enemy planes at a safe distance. It's also essential to keep control of the airfield. The engineers are preparing the nuclear warhead in its hangars.
That's the two main objectives we have. Hold the airbase for 40 minutes and defend the Kub missile batteries for 20. We have a large number of points available and some deployment time, so I'm just going to roll out the best units we can possibly have. 6 T-ATUs should provide some considerable firepower in Olga. I'm of course also going to call in all 4 of our Havocs, which by now are level 5 veterans. Some infantry will be used to back up the tanks just in case the enemy manages to rush in. It's good to have a small buffer behind which I can pull back my tanks so they don't have to contend with enemy infantry at close range. I'm going to set aside small task forces to take both Constantine and Fedor. I can't hold 2 separate small areas. I need some space to maneuver in and some way to move between the 2 objectives in case I need to shuffle troops back and forth. The troops I most likely expect to have to run around are the Apaches. The Havocs, which may have to be used as a flying reserve once again to patch whatever holes appear in my defenses. The ground in center is surprisingly closed, so I'm going to stack the forests with infantry. The enemy will have to pay dearly for the forests in center. I'm going to fight for every little wooded area, every building, every scrap of ground on center if the enemy gets that far. I'm also going to need a sprinkling of scouts here and there The Scout Jeep is pretty nice for this purpose. It's cheap and it has very good optics. As long as it doesn't get noticed, as long as I can keep the enemy at the range, they should do quite fine. Some additional anti-air at center. I'm not going to be caught without any air defenses this time. The French tanks will join our defense at the west edge of center. I have quite a large number of command units available to me, but I need at least 5, so I'm going to take out 1 extra just in case. The enemy is sure to come in huge numbers, and having to call in another CV from somewhere far away, or possibly get stuck without the chance of having a CV, is not something I especially really relish here. I'd rather just use the extra 200 points and get one of those. I also need a single reinforcement area, and this is the task force that will have to take and hold it. Some infantry ATGMs, weasels with autocannons, and UATs jeeps with recoilless rifles. It's not an especially strong force, but it'll hold long enough that I can call in more units. Start off with unloading the infantry. I'm expecting to hold these positions, so there's no need to keep the infantry units mounted. And then we are off to take Fedor. And Gregory. And Constantine. Constantine doesn't have any anti-air of its own. If the enemy tries to come in with ATGM helicopters, I expect my Havocs can just assist. The distance is short enough, and of course the Kub battery will fire at enemy helicopters that are nearby. Like quite a lot of infantry. I'm going to take some casualties taking this objective, but it's certainly worth it. Split the infantry up, deploy the BMPs at around the forest edges to provide supporting fires with ATGMs and 73mm chrome guns. Looks like Olga is already under attack. The first attack, thankfully, is a light one with old T-55s and T-72s. Looks like I already have made a small mistake in the deployment. A couple of Bradley scouts can simply waltz in to center and start targeting my Tunguskas. I would love to have some supply trucks on Olga. Those are one of the first thing I'll have to ferry in when I capture a reinforcement point. There's more enemy forces coming in. I'm calling in the Havocs, and the French AMX-32s will have to relocate and help fend off the enemy attack. A couple extra missile teams just to be safe. As long as they hang near the FOBs, the situation should be pretty good. I could have deployed those in the buildings at the very center of the objective area, but I decided against it. I have troops on the north side of the objective, and if the enemy manages to punch through the infantry stationed there, then the missile teams are too close in to be any good. I need some distance. Also, there's the possibility of some enemy forces slipping past Fedor and Constantine to hit the objective from south, in which case it's good to have a few guns defending against that. The secondary objectives have popped up. In addition to defending Olga and center, I also have to hold Constantine and Fedor. So the area which we must defend is rather large. There's the chance of giving up Olga after 20 minutes, but we'll have to make the call, see how our defenses on Olga are holding up at the 20-minute mark. the supply trucks coming in to Olga would take too long a time. I'm calling in a supply helicopter to deal with the most urgent supply situation, which in this case are the westmost T-80Us.
Проверка завершена, к вылету готовы. Есть, сэр. Куда нам отправляться, сэр?
One of my 5 tanks at Olga just died. This means every remaining defender will have to work that much harder.
Нас атакуют! Нас атакуют!
Looks like another explosive infantry charge coming in with those BMP ones.
Нужно проверить.
I'm going to have to call the Havocs back. If the enemy manages to slip enough infantry into those forests, it's game over for Olga. That means I'll lose control of the west side of that objective, and with it all the Kub missile batteries are gone. This looks like the enemy is starting to be serious. He's calling in T-80s of various models. The missiles in them have long enough range and are powerful enough to take out the Kubs in one hit.
Самое время. Внимание,
Yet another infantry charge from the west side. This time though I have additional fire support from Havocs fending off the BTRs.
Внимание, враг! Но мы с ним справимся. Куда нам отправляться, сэр? Внимание, враг! Но мы с ним справимся.
Some enemy troops have appeared near Fedor. I think I'll try to deny the use of the road going between Constantine and Fedor by placing some Spetsnaz in the forest.
Проверка завершена, к вылету готовы.
Situation in center is looking pretty stable. No major enemy pushes have been made there yet, and we are soon at 13-minute mark.
Какие будут приказания, сэр?
I'm calling in also a bunch of the old T-62s. Looks like the enemy is fond of using infantry charges at Olga. Since I don't really have enough autocannon units to deal with those charges. I'll have to do with the second best, which in this case is a bunch of old tanks. The tank guns are powerful enough to deal with BTRs and BMP1s before they manage to get up close, as long as I can get enough numbers to make sure I can target all vehicles. Oops, that's too close, too close. Those storms are trouble. They are best taken out immediately. The T-72s and T-62s are not really the problem. The storms are if they get into a good firing position. And that's the last of the force between Konstantin and Fedor. Looks like the enemy force is making forays at the east end of the airfield. I'm not sure whether they are targeting the airfield itself or Gregory. In either case, it's probably a good idea to beef up the defenses around Gregory a little. If I lose that zone, I can't call in any more reinforcements, and that's going to be it. Better pull back the T-80 a little. It's out of missiles, but the enemy T-80 still has enough missiles, and even a single hit is enough to seriously damage my tank. I need some more firepower. A single tank won't be able to hold there long. The tanks at the centermost forest will have to get to the other edge of that forest to add their weight into the fight. Damn looks. Fortunately, the infantry handles that one quickly. Last of my missile jeeps is... Last two of my missile jeeps are still alive, but the FOB is empty, and someone managed to destroy 4 of the other jeeps. Better pull back here. This is starting to look serious now. Two of my 4 cubs have been destroyed. One FOB is completely drained. Other one is nearly empty.
Мы сделаем это по-своему.
The Havocs are out of rockets and missiles, but I can't afford to pull any of them back just yet. They'll have to deal with the BTRs with the 30mm cannon they have. That's hopefully enough. There are only 4 more BTRs at a distance, and it looks like they are carrying anti-tank missile teams. So I should be okay to have a short refueling and rearming break here. Another one of my T-80Us has been taken out here.
Есть для нас приказ. Патроны, топливо, запчасти, все, что вам угодно.
I wish the T-80BVs at the edge of Constantine could be of more use, but I can't bring them out of Constantine. And in any case, tackling with enemy infantry at close range is a bad idea. The Spetsnaz will just have to hold on their own. That's the 20-minute mark. Better call in some more units. The west edge of center is practically lost. I'll concentrate my defenses around the center and east edge of the objective area. Sending alone Tunguska against 2 Apaches is probably not a good idea, but I can't spare anything else from center. As long as the Apaches are firing on BMP-1s, I guess I'll just have to eat up the losses. While usually tanks in forests are not a good idea, here they can work when they are buffered by friendly infantry. The idea is simply to have the Spetsnaz meet the enemy force first, crush their morale with the napalm launchers, and the T-62s can then help take out any vehicles approaching to close range. The lack of armor doesn't really matter. Everything is so weak at close range that it'll die quickly anyway.
Отправляемся в указанный квадрат. Обрушим на врага ураган пламени.
I'm hoping I can push in with all 4 Havocs at once. We should be able to overwhelm the Apaches that way. Of course, simply driving the helicopters toward center is good enough. I still have anti-air available at the location. Those rocket launchers are not really a threat that close to us, but better still to take them out. Looks like another quiet moment in the fight. The supplies situation is starting to look bad. I have already drained 5 FOBs worth of supplies, and we are only at the halfway point here. More enemy armor approaching on center. This is the reason I called in the missile teams. Although I lose both of my Tunguskas, they still buy enough time for the faggot team to take out the enemy tanks. All the FOBs at Olga are practically drained. I have 2 supply trucks worth of supplies at the location. I probably should be leaving the Olga objective pretty soon, but the positions are good, and in any case the consideration comes in too late. It's better to buy time by sitting in these trenches and forcing the enemy troops to deploy here, rather than get out into the open roads and be destroyed by enemy forces. The cubes are valuable, however, those I'll try to pull out. Looks like I've lost Constantine. The CV has died to something, probably the Apaches earlier, or maybe some enemy scouts which found it out in the bushes. The west edge of Olga is practically lost. A couple of T-62s won't be able to hold back the amount of enemy forces now rolling in. I'm diverting CV to Constantine. I still want to hold that objective, and in any case it's a secondary objective of holding it till the end of the fight. Another bunch of Apaches. Not taken down, but the amount of damage is still pretty good. Looks like I still have 3 T-82s left in Olga, but the objective area is completely and hopelessly lost. Enemy forces now have free access to attack Constantine, Fedor, and after those, center. Still, it's a piece of open ground, so let's make sure our ATGMs take a hefty toll on the enemy forces trying to cross Olga. That's another FOB empty. I still have 1 FOB full. in case of protracted fighting that's not going to last for long. The Havocs are again almost out of missiles. I really need to get a minute to reload them, but I think the enemy will not let me have that time. A direct attack at Gregory, but that'll fail unless the enemy brings up more forces. The 2 Abrams tanks are simply not enough against the forces arrayed at its defense. Looks like this is the break time I was hoping for. Refuel now, or I'll never get the chance to do it again. More infantry needed to deal with those tanks. Still, I should be able to take care of 2 M1s with that amount of troops. I wish I had left one of the coups behind. Can't get it all, I guess. I'm hoping the Hinds will target the T-62s and give my T-80s enough time to slip into cover. Looks like the enemy has brought more MRLS systems into the fight. 2 T-80Us left.
Отправляемся в указанный квадрат. Нас атакуют! Нас атакуют! Вы готовы, сэр? Какие будут приказания, сэр? Just spit it out. Нас атакуют! Я слышу, как пули свистят.
Oh lord, I'm not going to be able to hold this one back, even if I had ammunition. Yes, an interesting thing you can do. If you blunder into enemy machine gun range and are moving full force towards the enemy, if you know flying over them is safe, as in there are not any more troops behind the enemy machine gunners, it's better not to try to pull back. Inertia means you'll spend more time trying to pull back than simply pressing on and flying over the enemy tanks. You'll take some moral damage, but that's not a huge deal. Apaches go down, forests look rather clear, and Constantine and Fedor are not being attacked at the moment. The enemy keeps plugging away at my defenses in center, however. I've lost almost half of the T-64s I called in to help with the defense there. I'm almost out of supplies there, but then again the mission is almost over also. I only need a couple more minutes. That looks like a bad combination for us. The enemy tanks are not a huge problem in themselves. Those I can handle, but I have nothing to deal with the Mi-24s here. I called in some anti-air guns, but that's probably too little, too late. Fortunately, the enemy gunships seem to be backing off for the moment. I should have enough time to call in the Havocs to assist with the fight. One T-55 is still surviving out of the 15 or so I called in. I think they are doing relatively better than the T-62s I called in a bit earlier. Looks like I still had a couple of T-55s left in the corner there. That's in the past tense, of course. One of the Cubs went down. There's not much really I can do here anymore. There are no more supplies to ferry around. The troops I have are in relatively good defensive positions. The only active defense I have are the Havocs, which are low on morale and running out of ammunition pretty soon now. The first pair is already out of missiles. The Apaches just keep coming. That's a bit of an unfair fight. Unless the Apaches panic, there's no way we can take them down with 57s. Well, sometimes you do get lucky. that's it. I have maybe 1 or 2 missiles left. Now it's down to rockets and 30mm cannons for as long as the Havocs still have any ammunition left, or are even alive for that matter. I'm slowly running out of places to hide with them. Fortunately, these terms take down the scouts without cannons. We should be in a relatively good shape here.
Отправляемся в указанный квадрат. Орудия заряжены. Вылетаем.
1 minute to go. Fedor is holding up comfortably. Constantine not so much, but there's no enemy forces bearing in on those guys. Looks like the BTRs are quite happy to try and run the Havoc gauntlet there. Well, that's just fine by me. We lost our first Havoc, and the second one just barely doesn't make it. Not that it's a huge difference, there's no way to run from here.
We did it. They'll pay for this.
This has been Wargame European Escalation, the single-play missions. I'd like to end this video Let's Play to words from one of my favorite philosophers.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, contrary to what you've just seen, war is neither glamorous nor fun. There are no winners, only losers. There are no good wars, with the following exceptions: the American Revolution, World War II, and the Star Wars trilogy. If you'd like to learn more about war, there's lots of books in your local library, many of them with cool, gory pictures. Well, good night, everybody. Peace, man.